All right, guys, we are here at Audio Advice for the unveiling of the new MartinLogan Motion and Motion XT series. We're here with Alan Tarrant. How you doing, Alan?
I'm good, Gene. How are you?
I'm awesome. This is what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Hey folks, I'm Gene Delasala with Audioholics. I am excited. I'm overwhelmed by all the great products I'm seeing at Audio Advice, but I'm really excited about this new MartinLogan stuff. I installed Motion XT, the last generation of speakers, at a couple of clients' houses. I was very impressed with those speakers in terms of how much output they were able to do. They just had a good full range sound to them. Now I'm looking, and you guys have made a quantum leap in technology on some of the stuff that you've done in this series, and I wanted to talk to you about it, Alan, especially about the waveguide, the different driver materials, the porting, the bass loading of this speaker. There's a lot of exciting stuff to hear about this series of speakers. That's why I wanted to bring someone from MartinLogan in here to talk about it. Of course, we're going to be doing formal reviews in the future as well, so you'll get more information with measurements and all that good stuff. But Alan, why don't you give us a rundown between the Motion series and then the Motion XT?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we are really excited to be here. Our team has been working on this project for almost 24 months now. And the Motion series started off in 2010. It was one of these projects that was kind of a departure from the technologies that customers knew us from previously. We spent a lot of time looking at different technologies, designing and engineering, and we came out with the original Motion series in 2010. So what you're looking at here is actually the fourth generation of this product, and we like to think it's the best, of course. So we've got a couple different models here that we can talk about quickly. The biggest and most common question we get, though, is what changed? And I know it sounds canned, and I know everybody likes to say this, but the truth is, everything has changed on this. There is very little to nothing that's actually the same within these products currently. Even the tweeter, which we're known for, the folded motion driver, is actually a completely new generation of product. It's the Gen 2 Obsidian tweeter, uses a larger magnetic structure on it, which gives us better power handling capability, lower distortion. Other than that, you'll notice a couple of different things. Sticking with the tweeter for just a second here, the waveguide is a huge departure as well. So when you look at the MartinLogan story, obviously, people know us for electrostats. Controlled dispersion is a really key technology that's in an electrostatic driver. It focuses that energy of the sound into the listening area where it's most important. Folded motion tweeters do basically the same thing. The waveguides, however, have given us a slightly increased dispersion, which gives us a little bit larger sweet spot, and also makes the performance of it a little bit more even across the listening space. It is a pretty dramatic difference just in and of itself, not to mention the fact that the tweeters that you see here are also upgraded. Other things you'll notice, the mid-range cones are different. We spent a lot of time in engineering on this. In fact, you'll also notice that the mid-range drivers on both the Motion and the Motion XT match the CI series of product. The CI series was developed just about 2 years ago that we launched. A lot of the technology that was in there, we wanted to put in the floor standings and bookshelves as well. So if a customer wants to use a bookshelf and then a in-wall as a rear effects channel or an in-ceiling, these actually match the technologies from the Motion and Motion XT product as well. So on the Motion XT, the larger models, we've got the Kevlar with Nomex backing. On the Motion product, which is the step-down model on the B10 here you see, this is actually a woven fiberglass cone. Again, the same as we use in our CI models there.
So a couple of questions on the waveguide. You know, there's lots of benefits to waveguides. Number one is you increase the sensitivity of the driver. You could cross it over lower as a result. It also controls the dispersion, but are you also matching directivity of the mid-range so you have even dispersion between the mid-range and the tweeter? Well,
technically the mid-range is still going to radiate much larger than the actual tweeter itself, but this is where the performance is going to be really key, because this is what's going to be reflecting the most off of the environment. So the tweeter is still going to be much more controlled, but the matching of the two, it's a pretty incredible experience. So.
Right. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is between the Motion series and the Motion XT, obviously the Motion XT has a larger AMT, so it'll play louder, it has higher, efficiency and all that. But the dispersion is also more controlled. So it's 90 degrees horizontal for both.
Correct.
But it's only 45 degrees on the XT and 90 degrees on the regular Motion.
Yep.
Is there a case where you would want to use a Motion over a Motion XT?
If you're in an environment where placement is a little bit more critical and you don't have the ability to put it in the exact spot you want, in some cases the Motion product may be the better option because that wider dispersion does give you the bigger sweet spot. The XT driver is going to more closely mimic the dispersion characteristics of our electrostatic product. And of course, because it's a larger tweeter, it can move more air and is the best performing of the group.
So in reality, if you have a controlled listening space and you really want to focus in on the sound, the Motion XT is the
Absolutely.
way to go.
Yeah. So like the B100s here you see, or the F100s you see here as well.
So one thing I like about these speakers on the towers, at least, a lot of tower speakers that you see on the market, the woofers start like a foot or a foot and a half up. And now you have a problem called ground bounce that you're not compensating for. I love the fact that all the woofers, they start right at the bottom of the cabinet and there's no rear port. So when you put a rear port, sometimes that makes it challenging for placement when it's too close to a wall. There's a couple of advantages to a port underneath the cabinet. Number one, you can make the port tube longer, right?
Correct.
That's a huge advantage, so you could tune it lower. Number two, it acts as a low-pass filter, so if there's any fluttering effect, if the speaker's being driven hard, you're not going to hear it as much. And number three, the way it couples to the floor actually gives you some gain sensitivity in the bass frequencies.
That's exactly what we were going for. You're absolutely correct. And that was one of the big changes on the floor standing models, is going to the either single canard or twin cannon bass port. And you can actually tell if you look back towards the previous generations of Motion Series product like you were talking about installing, you can see the drivers, the low frequency drivers, were actually much higher in the cabinet. Here we are literally going almost all the way to the floor to get that floor bounce compensation we talk about. So.
Right. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, I noticed on the spec sheet, because I carefully study spec sheets on manufacturers' websites. I want to make sure that they're honest, okay? Most of the speakers in the series, they seem to have about a 92, 93 dB sensitivity rating. You would think the towers would have a higher rating because there's more drivers, but in fact, it's about the same as the bookshelf speaker. Was that a deliberate design choice? Was there a reason why the sensitivity rating is not higher on the tower than it is on the bookshelf speakers?
That's actually a great question. You know what we should do? We should pull in Andrew Lindsey from our product development team, who's actually here right now, and get him to respond to that.
All right, we're going to roll up our sleeves. We're digging deep, my friends. That's what we're going to be doing. Alan, I appreciate you dropping all this knowledge, but let's bring Andrew in to talk about the sensitivity stuff on these speakers and dig deep, roll in our sleeves and all that stuff.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
All right, we're here with Andrew Lindsey, the big guns of MartinLogan, the guy that designs, is in the trenches with these speakers. So the question that I posed to Alan, and he wanted to bring you in on this, why is it that the towers don't have a higher sensitivity rating than the bookshelves? Usually when you have a bookshelf speaker and it's 90 dB sensitive, the tower might be 93, 94 dB because you got more drivers.
Sure, yeah. So one of the choices we made with this new generation product, obviously the new tweeter is one of the stars of the show here. We made the conscious choice to choose a more linear response of the speaker rather than a large gain in sensitivity. We felt 92 dB was already pretty high. So instead of having a larger boost in sensitivity over the prior generation, we chose to smooth out the frequency response instead. So that's why you'll see that with all the changes, the sensitivity really didn't go up too much, because that gave us just more headroom to work with during our tuning process.
Oh, awesome, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have an idea, like the tower, the F200, like how loud would that play? Did you ever measure the SPL, the max?
I don't have the MOL for that, but more than what most people could stand, that's for sure. We haven't reached that limit yet.
That's a good problem
and
to
we
have.
play things loud.
Yeah. So, one thing I wanted to ask you about is the whole design process of these speakers. Do you do anechoic measurements, and do you do something with in-room to compensate afterwards? Can you give us a little rundown?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do both. So we have a very large anechoic chamber up in Mississauga, Canada, and of course we put everything through there, get our measurements, and make fine-tune adjustments based off of blind listening tests. But we also use in-room measurements, because an anechoic measurement is an indicator of performance, but since the speakers ultimately live in a room that has a sonic signature, that doesn't always translate, because if it measures great in a perfect environment and now I put it into an actual room which is far from a perfect environment, those are not the same realities. So in the case of the towers, they have what we call floor bounce compensation built into them, which is to account for the woofers reflecting off of the floor before the other drivers in the speaker. And when you throw it in an anechoic chamber, it might look a little strange because there isn't a floor in an anechoic chamber. So once you actually put it into a real room, all of which have floors luckily, it actually measures smoother in that regard. So we use both. We tune for reality.
And that's really why it's important to understand the measurements and not judge a speaker just by looking at a CTA 2034 measurement graph, right? There's way more to a speaker. How it loads into the room is really imperative. That's why I like to do a combination of both. And it's awesome that you guys have the foresight to actually think about that, because there's very few speakers that actually have floor bounce compensation in towers.
Yep.
I think
Absolutely.
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, Andrew, I appreciate you giving us the rundown here. I'm excited to actually do some real measurements on these speakers in our own environment and have Matthew Pose kind of really get into the details of these speakers. Of course, we'll be consulting with you if we need more technical details on that. And guys, I hope you like this video. Please thumb it up. Please like it. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to me if you want to suggest video topics or ask questions. And until next time, my friends, keep listening.